Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra.
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people
Associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked,
and sometimes what didn't,
you will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts
And inspire you to do even greater things.
This is part 2 of the conversation celebrating the 250 episodes of the Software People Stories with our guest host, Gopalan. Gopalan was the first guest on the show and agreed to play host and have the hosts as guests. In part 1, he was exploring aspects related to how the hosts prepare for an episode and how different formats work for the Software People Stories. In this part, he continues to explore his curiosity of how the minds of podcast hosts work in handling planned and unplanned situations. Some of the questions that he asks include things that went wrong and what went right, about similarities of podcast editing and movie making, how some difficult guests had to be handled, and how one stays in the conversation, but stay detached. Handling situations when known persons say things that you don't feel the same way about, or no, it may not be completely factual. And how one would resist the temptation to not get into arguments or negating something that the guest says. And we also had a question for him on some of the podcasts Gopal listens to, of course, in addition to the Software People Stories.
Let me do that part that Shivaguru says that he employs, which is what went wrong and what went right. So do you guys have anything in those to share, like some funny things that happened and what you had to do, or something that completely surprised you? I'm sure there are many of them. So if you were to share one or two of them, it'll be nice for everyone, I think.
I'll go first because Anand knows this. Anand introduced me to somebody and they agreed for an interview. And what happened is in the first couple of minutes, there was a lot of background noise from that person's environment. So I said, okay. And there was initial minutes that we went back and forth with muting, unmuting. Somewhere along the way, I forgot to press record. We had a whole 1 hour conversation. And then at the end of it, I realized, I said, why isn't Zoom giving me the recording? And I didn't even tell Anand. Next day, I called this person and I profusely apologized. It was really lucky that, he agreed to another time slot. And then I went and told Anand, I said, I've goofed up. This is what happened. I think I'm glad that the person didn't feel so, terrible about it. But that's been a huge gap from my side.
So before that, you start recording the previous day.
First hit record. Don't care whatever gets recorded, but just hit that record button.
For me, the biggest one was initially you do voice check. And you do all the voice check and it sounds very good. But when you start editing, you find that one of the voices, at least most of the time, the guest who's speaking, their voice is very feeble. You don't hear that in the Zoom. Then you say, okay, how might you prevent it? And then you do a voice check before record, stop, all of that. I started doing it now. After the initial bit of things, somehow that has not come forward. And then you have to do some of those, using Audacity, you have to do some changes in the voice modulation. And another thing that we did starting off, some of the repeated words are, we used to edit it out. We were thinking, because we want to have a shorter one, because there's the listening and everything. That was another thing that we felt it's not sounding natural. It looks like, they have prepared the speech. It was not. We just had to remove some of those filler words. So that is a big learning for me, because I said earlier, I used to say my goal was to keep it as short as possible. So if they wave around, don't do that. But then it removed that naturalness of the conversation. So now we say if there's a laughter, we just keep the laughter that way. When somebody is listening, also, I've heard comments saying that, okay, I also laughed along with you. It sounded like there are two people. I'm also in that conversation, sort of a thing that was there. I thought that was very aha moment for me.
I've had guests who said that do not publish my episode till I've listened to it. And there was this one particular guest who, the Gayatri, this is in response to our initial attempts at first, editing the ums and ahs and other fillers that we would notice. This person, I think, listened to their episode 3 times before I got the go ahead to say, okay, publish. And the third time was when they came back and said, you know what? You can play a drinking game with the number of times I've said, So could you please do something about it? I said, oh my God. But yeah.
Yeah, I also had both technology challenges or surprises. You think that something has been done but not done. Or, a couple of times, you just do a Control A instead, or when you select and then say delete, you want to delete just one small portion, these ums and ahs, then maybe an hour's work is gone. You have to start again. But other than that, there have also been a couple of challenges with a couple of guests kind of almost hijacking the episode. They have their own agenda. They just go on and on about something else that they want to come and talk about. So it takes a little bit to bring them back and also probably edit it out. And in fact, one guest said, why don't you come over, we'll record it at home. So we go home, he said, they come home for dinner. So when he started saying, oh, there is nice dinner being cooked, and they are eating this, having that, all kinds of things before we came to the actual this thing. Then suddenly he said, oh, now we'll have some kids over. So I'm calling the kids over. It was a bit of a challenge. Yeah, it was fun. And
I think
this
is a challenge of a different kind. Now I think after all this editing, your respect for movie makers must have gone up tremendously.
No, but we are only doing editing of the voice. We don't even do a video editing. It's huge.
But I did, I was, one of my favorite books actually on project management is about the making of the movie Sholay, right? And that there they mentioned that the editing, because it was the first time that they'd experimented with, live sound, and they had used certain techniques to enhance the thrill factor in the film, etc. It took them a year to edit. It took them a whole year to edit, and the director was under a lot of pressure because nobody was willing to finance. They'd run out of money. They didn't know whether this concept would work and so on. So, I think even today, I think after doing this podcast work, when I have this habit of reading up about a film, so I realized that the shooting really wraps up quickly, but the editing takes almost 2/3 the amount of time, if not more, to. Yeah.
Actually, even the planning for the shoot also is very critical. I mean, if you look at most recently, what I read about was this PS1 and PS2 that Maniratnam took. The amount of detailing they worked before and after is just mind-boggling. All the movie making books are real lessons on project management. There was one about it's I think called Making Movies was the title of the book. That's also a brilliant book, actually. It's interesting. So you're on your way. You have gotten into the show business, first step into the show business. So I guess that's the next one you guys should shoot for, pun intended. So that's great. But has there been, other than completely failing to record, has there been, and getting unexpected guests added onto the show, have you had any other such episodes that made it completely sabotage whatever that you are planning to do? Or it was mostly under control?
One is language. At least, one guest got carried away, and then like we would talk, in person over coffee or tea or anything like that, naming people and then using all kinds of profanities and say, I don't know this person, what this person did and not that and all that. I said, no, just cool down. We don't say all those things on a podcast if you want to restate that. It says, no, but whatever I say, that person is like that. We can't.
So yeah, it's a trick, right? You need to let them be themselves, but at the same time, they need to maintain some quorum that they may not believe in. So I think that's interesting. Yeah, you're going to say something, Gayatri?
I was telling, I've had one podcast where they went in and talked only about their firm. I mean, for how much ever I come back, that it was like almost like a marketing for the firm and their product. And we've had such ones also. But you say, okay, can we record and can we come back to the topic and all of that? You have to keep on trying that. But few and far between, because most of them think that because that this conversation is also going to go in their social media, LinkedIn and everything, they want to, while they want to talk about their current firm, they also want to think that it's about them and not about the current firm, about that work. So while we think it is software people, it's actually together. It's not about software, it's more about the software people. So that's how we keep pulling them back in.
Okay, the other one is, I think it is more from my own personal thing. Normally, when I'm listening, I get so involved and completely into it, I cannot extricate myself to ask questions. Today, I'm trying hard because when you describe something, I just get into it and start imagining what could have happened and don't come back to asking questions. So, did you guys train, or it was very natural for you to just remaining? See, being an observer is one thing, getting involved in the discussion is something. I am more of the second one. I don't stay out and ask the next question. Today I'm working very hard on that. So how did you guys do it? Was it natural to you?
I mean, it's been a mixed bag. Like I mentioned earlier, I would have enough questions to make sure that I didn't freeze. I sort of had freezable moments because when I sense the person is going to sort of wind down their thought, I'm like, oh my God, what's the next question I need to ask? That has happened with me. But I think as time has passed, it's become a combination of, being involved and allowing the conversation to flow. So it could just be a simple question of, and then what did you do? And then what happened? You're just a part of the conversation. And then I think what I've consciously learned in the last 2 years, I'd say, is the power of a pause. As I've told myself, it's okay to take a pause and then ask a question. It doesn't have to be so seamless. So, mixed bag.
For me, it was a struggle because I talk a lot. So because I have to let the other person shine, not the shine on me. I think the only thing I do is so I kind of use that being in the present, just listen to what they are saying. And I normally note down 3 or 4 things I found curious about them. So if that doesn't come naturally to me, I always look down at my notes and say, okay, this is something I will ask. If it's not like, that freeze moment doesn't come. It does come sometimes. So I always know that I can, fall back on that. That helps me to stay in the moment, keep listening and stay with the conversation. And I also don't write notes anymore. While I think that, have it recorded as a recording and I will listen to it and do the show notes. So I'll start doing that. Earlier and all, I used to, by the time the conversation gets over, I used to be under the pressure to have the heading and the subtitle also. So I used to think that I should know then. Now I don't no longer do that. Only while editing, I say I will get that going. So those are things that I think as you keep doing, you also give yourself enough credence and space to say, okay, you will get that. Don't worry.
Yeah, I think, Gayatri summarized it very well. As long as you are aware. Earlier, I also used to note down at least a few points, questions, and all that. But there have been many instances where probably the 8 to 12 minutes is probably the kind of a barrier, because sometimes that is when most guests take time to introduce themselves. But some of them don't reveal any details at all. They say, yeah, I graduated here and then I'm doing this and that's my job. I just shut up. Okay, so even using Chitra asking about pause, no, how do you prod them to say something more? Or, oh, we still have at least another 20 minutes to go, or another 30 minutes, how do we record? So there is a little bit of panic that may kick in at that time, but then just pausing and then just being curious is, I think, that's the way it has been. It is still a learning exercise. It's more of every interaction is a learning exercise that way.
But almost in all episodes, I found you guys to be pretty professional at that. I always used to, how does he not even get involved and get lost? And how is he ready with the next question? That was always my doubt. The other thought that I used to wonder is that, when we know people, particularly when we are talking to people that we know, whether we like it or not, we have some opinions, we have some ideas, but the way they come across may be different from what we had imagined. So if that happens, what do you do? Do you fight it? Do you just let go? What happens? Does it happen?
Then it definitely happens. It has happened at least 3-4 instances. Like you said, there are things that we form as impressions of people based on our interactions or what you've heard. And when you hear something to the contrary or something very different, it takes a little bit, maybe a shock, or saying that, no, can this be true? Or is this person really that way? Or things like that. But at the same time, you don't want to, because they are known to you, either come up with a sarcastic comment or say that I don't believe you, kind of thing. So just be curious. And then that's where I think kids are the greatest inspiration. When we talk with children, sometimes they are lying, or they know you are trying to pull a fast one, but the way they respond and they do that, they either want to call off your bluff, or they will try maybe a slightly different way of asking the same thing or not doing the same thing. They'll get it done, right? So trying to see how you can lighten the situation, and more probably to relieve my own stress at that point of time. Yeah.
For me, when I have spoken to people I've known, I think I set aside the fact that I know them. So I've mentally prepared myself. Very often in the conversation, they've said, but you already know this, right, Chitra? This was familiar, and I pretend like I didn't listen to it. No, I don't. Say whatever it is you want to say again. So for me, it's treat everybody like you're meeting them for the first time. And this is something that I've consciously adopted. Although when I go back and listen to the episode, I'm like, wow, I never knew this about this person. But that's okay. They said it. So it must be good. So
one of the things I learned from Chitra, I don't know if Chitra remembers this, is about voice modulation before any of these podcasts. So I consciously do this sort of clearing your throat and keeping a warm bottle of water and everything. And at that point in time itself, I keep telling myself, saying that be respectful, do this, do that. So a few affirmations I tell that because whatever we say, right, this is going into their permanent record. It's not just us, right? It's so you have to be respect. So that sort of, I keep telling this to myself before every podcast. That's one thing that has helped me. And I also I like what Chitra was saying, intentionally not remember they as my friend or mine, whoever my relationship is. And they say, when anybody listens to this podcast, it's a conversation between two people, and they don't have any relationship with either or neither. So I think that is how I look at it and say it has to be useful, beneficial. That's a mindset I try every time, but I don't know how much of it is coming through.
No, actually, no, nothing was evident. These are all things that I wonder when I listen to these things. How do you get over these kind of things when you're handling? So, in fact, the other thing that I always used to wonder is, you're talking to somebody, you might have had some common past or some experience that you have had or you both have shared, but you have a different take on it vis-a-vis that other person. And the other person is saying, and you have a completely opposite view to that, but it is their story. So how do you resist? I used to wonder, I would have said, that's all nonsense. It doesn't work like that. But I've never seen that kind. And I used to wonder, how did you even keep quiet? I mean, this is, so did you have such things happen? Or am I imagining?
Not exactly, but then one thing is that, like Gayatri said, the spotlight is on the guest, and I see my role as, if you see from a listener's perspective, one of us is probably more constant. I mean, every week they hear one of us, etc. Whereas the guests keep changing. So it is about me carrying the story of this person or sharing it with a third person, saying that what is some interesting thing about this person, or what is it that I learned, or what we can learn, etc. So it's about, they say, the opinions expressed are the individual's expression and all that. So it's a kind of a pass-through thing. It is not, I don't need to react to what they're saying. It's just what they're saying.
Yeah.
And also one thing that I always tell myself is that this is a medium where we are able to edit. So even if, and this is something that I tell in my introduction also. If somebody says calling bell or any kind of a problem, we can edit it out. We've had instances where we had to edit when there was some conversation that we said that's not appropriate, or somebody gave a feedback. So we removed it even after it was published. 2 days after it was published, we've had those instances. So, so that way that there is a safety in terms of thing, and virality hasn't happened yet. That something has happened and then it's become very scandalous. Thankfully, those are things. We've had episodes which have had like 2,000 listens and all, but you never had those scandalous moments. It's only been a learning aha moments. I think that's that extent, and we are very proud so far.
You would have been famous though.
Yes.
Yeah. You've been a wonderful, host, and then kept us all engaged for close to an hour now. So I am also curious. I have a few quick questions. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you which is your favorite podcast. We know that. No, what other podcast do you listen to?
Other than this, I actually I don't listen to specific persons or something like that. I listen to things on, mind, emotion management, and those kind of things. Also, random things on geography and how certain geographies have. I am better off. Once I remember a friend of mine asking, do you prefer to read, view a video, or listen? Or where do you learn most? I actually realized I learn most when I listen. When I hear somebody tell me, I really learn a lot, even more than reading. Whereas I had a cousin who he says, I cannot listen. I'll only have to read. Whatever you need to tell me, write it and give it to me. I will learn it. So I don't have anything specific, but I kind of randomly listen to many kinds of things. I even listen on. I don't have any formal learning on music, but about music structures and how these ragas happen. All those kind of. There are some podcasts that I listen to, so it's pretty random in my case. But I'm most loyal to software people stories, though.
That's why I didn't ask you. Yeah, thanks. Of course, big thanks to you for agreeing to be a host. And of course, all our listeners, and Anita and Siddharth who couldn't make it now, we'll probably see if we can get them also.
I really don't have the professional qualification to do this, but I just enjoy talking to you guys. I have a lot more questions on how you guys do this, but it's been a very, very, I feel very good about being part of this and being with you guys all through this. So keep it, and for the next 250.
Thank you so much, Gopal, and thank you to all the listeners who continue to listen and bring the feedback in. That means so much for us.
Yeah. And thanks to all of you, Shiv, Gayatri, Gopal, It's always a pleasure talking to all of you. And I hope I can do a bit more.
And I do hope that this got recorded today.
Please let me check. Oh, no. It is not ending. We hope you enjoyed some of our experiences in bringing you 250 episodes of stories of software people. We believe that everyone has a story to tell that will inspire or educate others. When would you like to tell your story? Or if you would like to submit somebody else's story and be a guest host, please record a sample or the full conversation and share it with us. We look forward to sharing more and more stories from our listeners. See you soon.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
Please subscribe on your favorite podcast client.
And spread the word in your network.
if you'd like to share your story,
Contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.